Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots to get to this morning. Israeli officials claiming they are shifting to a different phase of the conflict as they are floating yet another supposed plan for what may come in the day after. We will break all of that down for you. We also have a member of the Knesset who is signing on to South Africa's claims of genocide against Israel, leading to huge political ramifications for him. There's a whole freak out going on over that, so we'll break that down for you. We've also got some interesting ways that conflict is flowing into domestic politics, protesters disrupting Joe Biden during a speech down in Charleston, so we'll show you those images. We also have the Iowa caucuses next week. And a new poll is showing Nikki Haley surging into a single-digit deficit with Trump in New Hampshire. So she is definitely surging, closing the gap. Is it enough? Is it too late? All of that. We'll show you their closing ads as well as they head into Iowa. A lot of interesting stuff going on there. Also have some updates for you as we're learning more about what may have caused that door to blow off of a jet while they were in the air. This was the subject of Saagar's monologue yesterday, so we're getting a little bit of insight into what the hell may be going on there, and it is not good news.
Not good.
We also have some media updates for you. Mehdi Hasan out at MSNBC. He has chosen to leave after his show was canceled, so we will break down the reasons why, perhaps, he was sidelined there. Also excited to talk to Jeff Stein. He has a new podcast breaking down the history of abolitionist John Brown, which is really fascinating. I highly recommend.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to talk to him about that. Before we get to that, though, if you guys can help us out and sign up for a premium membership, we've got our RFK Jr. focus group that is going to be happening on Thursday. Our crew is going there. We're going to be filming it. Our great moderator, James Johnson, and our friends over at JLP Partners. But these do cost a lot of money, so if you can help us out, sign up for a premium membership. And we actually are going to allow premium members, you guys can submit questions that we will take into consideration to ask for the focus group. You can do that in the AMA section of the website. So if you would like to try and submit one, you can become a premium member, or existing members can do that as well. We always want to try and keep this, we want to keep it within the BP universe, just to show that we're a little bit different over here. So anyway, breakingpoints.com if you can help us out.
Yeah, and we're formulating those questions and ideas now, so go ahead and send them in if you have ideas of what you want to know from RFK Jr. supporters. All right, let's go ahead and get to the very latest out of Israel. Put this up on the screen from the Wall Street Journal. This was quite an extraordinary interview overall that the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant gave. The headline here, Israel plans for next phase of Gaza war, Defense Minister says. And in this piece, they kind of buried the lead. So Gallant is floating, and this is not official government policy, but this is what he's floating. He says, as he sees it, a multinational task force should be set up in the day after in Gaza, led by the U.S., with European and Middle Eastern partners. They should oversee the rehabilitation of Gaza. This, of course, comes after last week you had those far-right ministers, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, making very clear that they believe the appropriate day-after plan in Gaza is ethnic cleansing. Of course, we've had Netanyahu reports that he is interested in the same. We've had a plan come out from a government ministry laying out 3 different options, and the one that they said they preferred the most was pushing Palestinians out of Gaza. The idea being basically to make all of Gaza uninhabitable, mission accomplished there, and then to pressure the U.S. and others that this is the humanitarian solution, is to forcibly remove Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. I think it's worth noting in terms of Yoav Gallant, with regards to this war, he has been hand in glove with Netanyahu. He actually at one point was fired by Netanyahu. Yes, I don't know if you remember this. It sparked huge protests over the judicial coup that Netanyahu was pushing through that is now in dispute. The Supreme Court of the country overturning that and causing yet another crisis because of that. So there's been friction with them on the past. There's more details of what Yoav Gallant is floating here in The Guardian. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. They said, under Gallant's plan, which is not official policy and has yet to be submitted to other ministers, Israel's offensive in Gaza would continue until hostages taken on October 7th were freed and Hamas's military and governing capabilities dismantled. Then the outline says a new phase would begin during which Hamas will not control Gaza and will not pose a security threat, with unspecified Palestinian bodies, apparently local civil servants or communal leaders assuming the territory's governance. Gallant said that Israel would reserve its right to operate inside the territory, but there would be no Israeli civilian presence in the Gaza Strip after the goals of war have been achieved. Gaza residents are Palestinian, therefore Palestinian bodies will be in charge with the condition that there will be no hostile actions or threats against the state of Israel. Earlier this week, Israeli media reported military and intelligence officials favor dividing Gaza into regions and subregions with civil administration and the distribution of humanitarian aid in each area entrusted to local leaders seen as trustworthy. Many people describing this as sort of a Bantustan plan, relating it to the ghettos that were established in South Africa.
Yeah, the biggest problem that we have with this entire thing is it's obvious that they don't have a unified plan that they agree on. Then their most convenient one is to offload the responsibility onto the United States. And the saddest thing, Krystal, is I cannot rule out that our leaders are not dumb enough to actually want to sign up to something like that. They're like, oh, well, it would just be too disruptive. It's like, absolutely not. Israel is responsible for this. They need to pay for all of the reconstruction, and they also are the ones who need to pay for administration. And I think that the reason that they are trying to get out right now is because, Krystal, we covered this. They had 100-something soldiers who were wounded in a single day yesterday. The IDF announced this morning that 9 of them were killed just yesterday, that were killed inside of Gaza. That was not just included in the Hezbollah attacks. We need to understand here that the occupation, and actually, if I went and I read the descriptions of the IDF soldiers who were all killed, they were all in combat engineers brigades, meaning that they were involved in demolition or some sort of occupation-like activity. This is where I believe the vast majority of their future casualties are all going to come from. And if you read again the incidents, ambushed in Khan Yunis, ambushed in Gaza City, involved in a demolition activity, they want us, the Europeans and the Middle Eastern partners, to somehow be responsible and to catch all of the flak, the bullets, and eventually elevate us to something called primary occupation status. Absolutely not. And I think that they might be realizing the nightmare that they've now signed themselves up for. Of course, the preferred solution for the most right-wing ministers is going to be ethnic cleansing, but it becomes clear that I think they are starting to see what they have created and that mess, and they're going to try to extricate themselves by pushing the bill onto the United States, to the UN and others, which I think is outrageous. I mean, they are the ones who they should bear 100% of the cost for all of this. Not $1 of this should come from the US.
So I read it differently. Yeah. This plan by Yoav Gallant, which there's a reason why I floated that there was previously tension and distance between him and Netanyahu, I don't think that this really is representative whatsoever of what the Israeli government really wants to do. Remember, the U.S. position is supposedly that, what we want is the Palestinian Authority to be bolstered, to be enabled to take some governing role in Gaza, and then for a two-state solution process to be seriously undertaken. There is zero appetite for that in the Israeli government. And even Yoav Gallant, who is, based on his comments around this war, a total psycho, but he's what counts for like a moderate in this administration. Even he doesn't mention the Palestinian Authority or any of the things that the U.S. is allegedly pushing for here. I think what happened is you have not just Smotrich, not just Ben-Gvir, but Netanyahu, Herzog. You can read through the list of Israeli cabinet members and Likud party members and military officials and journalists and commentators who are all pushing the ethnic cleansing plan. You can look at the polling of Jewish Israelis who overwhelmingly think that is the right solution. And so you had this burgeoning pressure because they said it too many times, too clearly, and too out loud, where even the U.S. felt the need to put out this little statement of like, oh, we disagree with this, et cetera, et cetera. So I view this plan less as a real serious idea of what they want to do than a bit of ass covering of like, oh no, that's not really representative of what we want. Look, here's another idea that we're floating out there. And by the way, they went ahead to make sure that idea was like also completely unpalatable to the US. Putting the assignment for reconstruction of Gaza and some sort of oversight of Gaza onto the U.S. and to the UN. So that's how I read this in terms of, the dynamics and the push and pull supposedly between the U.S. and the Israelis. I think it's very clear based on the actions in the Strip, based on the comments from everyone from Netanyahu on down, including Smotrich, including Ben-Gvir, what they really want is the ethnic cleansing plan. That is what they've been executing effectively, and that they're just floating this option as like a bit of public ass covering.
You may certainly be right. I do think that I think actually this seems more likely to me just because of the outrageous. I mean, there's just no, in my opinion, I do not think it would be a palatable situation, both to America, to Egypt, to all these other Middle Eastern countries. I think a full-scale regional war would be more likely than acceptance of a genuine ethnic cleansing, at least in terms of expulsion from the Gaza Strip. Now, starvation and all that, that's a different story. And certainly because we're in something like that. I guess the net effect doesn't necessarily matter, but, you know, this seems to me as if something that could arrive, sadly, as sort of middle ground solution, quote unquote, as horrible and awful as it would be, I think, for everybody involved. Now, let's go and put this next one, please, up on the screen, because this highlights the expanding nature of the conversation. Because we're here talking right now about Gaza, but the likelihood right now of the regional war, which we touched on yesterday, demonstrates that these people are hell-bent on expanding the war, largely, I believe, to be able to keep their hold on power because, of course, the Israeli people, you know, Netanyahu's got, what, a 4-6% approval rating? But as long as this thing goes on, it's better off for him. And he says that to the Wall Street Journal that Hezbollah knows, quote, we can copy and paste Gaza to Beirut. Now, there is zero question in my mind, and I'm curious what you think, that a copy and paste of Gaza to Beirut would erupt in a full-scale regional war. Yeah. Because of Hezbollah, because of Iran, and certainly because Lebanon is a sovereign nation with partners and allies in the region. They're just already, we're at such a massive breaking point in terms of the relations between Jordan and Israel, Jordan, the United States, Egypt, and others. If they were to do that and effectively declare war on the nation of Lebanon with Hezbollah somehow caught in between, I just don't have any doubt in my mind it would erupt, and the U.S. would almost certainly become involved. So first of all, the idea is a fantasy, but disturbingly, the more that they begin to talk this way, it just feels like 2002 all over again. Put the next one, please, up on the screen, because the way that they talk here, he says, my basic view is that we are fighting an axis, not a single enemy. Iran is building up military power around Israel in order to use it. It's based the exact same playbook, Krystal, of they've, you know, shoddily, you know, attempted their so-called mission post-October 7th in Gaza. They're realizing already that this is not going the way that they wanted it to be, and they're trying to sell it to the public. So now, just like President George W. Bush did in 2002, the axis of evil becomes a thing, and now we're starting to beat the drum and towards Hezbollah. And then we've all seen this movie before, but America doesn't have, I think, the courage or really the resolve to stand up and just be like, this is not going to happen. You know, and we actually, you know, put your finger or whatever on the scale, and we just seem to be incredibly impotent in our handling of this entire situation, which is humiliating, honestly, especially if we do get involved in this war. It will be 100% on Joe Biden. And it is 100% on Joe Biden. I mean, they have completely bypassed Congress. These, you know, national security Democrats who were like former CIA agents. And even they're freaking out.
They're the one, Alyssa Slotkin and these people, and former, you know, people who served in the military as well. They're looking at this situation. They're saying this is a potential disaster for us. You have, as we covered yesterday, defense officials furiously leaking to the Washington Post and the Huffington Post and seemingly anyone who will listen to them of like, you know, they don't really care about the human toll being, you know, the horrors that are being inflicted on the people in Gaza. But they're looking at this and they said every single war game scenario that we play out with an escalated war against Hezbollah is a total disaster. It ends in complete nightmare. So it's not like we're the ones that are just inventing this out of whole cloth. Our own military and defense establishment is playing this out and saying this does not end in a good place. And yet you see all these articles about this hand-wringing, and nowhere in there do they explain that there is one very clear way to ratchet down the hostilities, and that's to have a negotiated settlement and a ceasefire for the fighting and the bombing of Gaza to stop. That gets us out of this whole entire mess. So in any case, there's also these comments from Yoav Gallant and others in the Israeli political class and the defense establishment in Israel that they're, quote, shifting to a new phase of the war. It's going to be less, you know, just like all-out assault and more targeted. We'll see. We have not seen that yet. They've been sort of floating this since the beginning of the year, and yet we've seen some of the deadliest strikes and deadliest days in this entire assault, even in the new year. And they mentioned in particular, that there's going to be issues with Rafah, where I think over 1 million Palestinians have gathered at this point.
That's right.
That's at the border with Egypt there. And now, originally it was, Hamas's command and control is in the north, and we've got to flatten that and destroy. Well, they did that. That's destroyed. It's uninhabitable. There's basically nothing left there. Then it was, we got to move to Khan Yunis. That's where Hamas really is. Okay, well, they've destroyed neighborhoods in Khan Yunis, massive death tolls there. Now they're saying, well, really, they're in Rafah, so we've got to move there. And, the human toll is going to be absolutely devastating. And at the same time, the humiliation for the U.S. just continues. Put this next piece up on the screen. Israel to tell Antony Blinken, who is in the region right now, that Palestinians cannot return to the north of Gaza without a hostage deal. Now, hanging over this elephant in the room that doesn't even get mentioned in this piece, I believe, is that there is basically nothing to return to in the north of Gaza in terms of any sort of civilian infrastructure that can sustain life. But let me read you a little bit of this. They say the big picture, making progress toward the return of Palestinians to their homes and ensuring they are not forcibly displaced from Gaza is one of the goals of Blinken's talks in Israel this week. The Biden administration has expressed concerns over recent statements from some radical right-wing Israeli ministers who have called for Palestinians to be driven out of the Strip. It's not only them, by the way. What they're saying, Palestinian civilians must be able to return home as soon as conditions allow, Blinken said on Sunday in a press conference with the Qatari prime minister in Doha. They cannot and they must not be pressed to leave Gaza, he stressed. But behind the scenes, Israeli sources told Axios, while Israel doesn't in principle oppose allowing Palestinians to return to northern Gaza, officials will tell Blinken such a move needs to be part of a new hostage deal. Let me be clear. Hamas should release the hostages. No doubt about it. It is a war crime to hold, especially civilians, as hostages. It is unacceptable. They should release the hostages. What is Israel doing here? They're basically holding the people of Gaza hostage based on these hostilities and demanding that their wants and needs be fulfilled in order for people just to return to the rubble of their homes that have been overwhelmingly destroyed in northern Gaza. And as I said before, Saagar, I mean, it's so clear that the U.S.'s words and rhetoric mean
zero.
Nothing.
Right.
Because they see that they can do what they want, and they keep pushing like, okay, what if we attack a hospital? What if we do that? Will they go along with us? Yes, we will. What if we flatten all of northern Gaza? What if we impose a complete siege? What if half of Gaza residents are starving? Will they do anything to push back? The answer has been no. So why would they listen to our little pearl-clutching, hand-wringing comments about what we want to see when there's zero willingness to back it up with anything other than those words?
No, I can't disagree with that at all. I think it's an outrageous decision and a statement, and to be communicated again to the United States. Two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, we saw the videos just yesterday of those Israeli girls who are still being held hostage. They got like blood on their face or whatever. It's horrifying. But then, you can't erase and say that their captivity is going to be subject to 1 million or so people who are living in a tent, on the brink of starvation by the border. I mean, this is, insanity. And then, as you said, in tandem, where are they supposed to go? I mean, the more and more I look at this, I'm just genuinely so humiliated on behalf of the United States of America. Like, if you go back and you read and you think about the way that even past presidents who, not necessarily the strongest people, there's a famous quote of Bill Clinton behind the scenes saying, who the hell does this guy think he is when talking about the Israeli prime minister? And he said, who needs to remind who of who the superpower is here? And as, increasingly, it's clear they don't care or listen to what we think. And by the way, that's fine. They're a sovereign country. They can do what they want. But, when they're also got their hand out like this, asking for emergency replenishment of their artillery shells and their weapons and all this other stuff, then, we got to have a little bit of respect here and just say that this is clearly, look, take Israel out of it. And this has been my entire, position from day one. Israel, Palestine, I'll put it all out of it because I don't like to think about quote unquote humanitarian stuff because you get really bogged down in the details. Strategically, this has been a disaster. This has heightened tensions for us in the Middle East. We've had to redirect tens of billions of dollars of military resources. We stand on the brink of a regional war in a region that we already lost 2 wars that we've just come 25 years or so off of. What possible reason would we want to get involved in this? And the humanitarian situation situation is both upstream and downstream of this, which is why we should be absolutely focused on making sure this doesn't happen. And, Israel cannot be talking about their hostages and the emotional situation of this and then try to hold hostage the million or so people who are been kicked out of their homes. It doesn't bear any scrutiny. And if anything, it's just going to multiply the criticism against them because, let's be honest, the sheer numbers of the Palestinians is what, 10,000 to 1 of the Israeli hostages that are being held here. And the sympathy that they had on October 7th has evaporated, in the entire eyes of the world.
Oh, yeah.
I saw it all over Europe, just so people know. When I was in Europe, the amount of Palestinian flag and activism stuff that was scrawled in public spaces. I was at the International Red Cross Museum in Geneva, Switzerland. It had a big thing. It's like, war crimes and are wrong and everything. Even war has rules. I sent you that photo. This is all over the world. It's only right here in America that, our discourse is so screwed up. I don't know what it is.
I read an editorial or op-ed, I guess, in Haaretz, which of course is an Israeli media outlet that was saying, listen, whether you agree with the genocide charges or not, we went through people accusing us of being occupiers to accusing us of ethnic cleansing and genocide. Mm-hmm. That's where we are, and with plenty of merit. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of Israeli security, in terms of any sort of humanitarianism, in terms of any sort of international law, in terms of any desires for peace and not blowing this up into a larger conflagration, it's all a complete and utter disaster. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.